My name is Amelia. I am 34 years old, and I never imagined that a simple dinner order would be the spark that tore open decades of buried wounds. I grew up in a mansion with marble floors, glittering chandeliers, and gardens that stretched farther than a child could run. Outsiders envied us, calling my family perfect. They did not see the cold hierarchy inside those walls. My sister Diane was the golden child. I was the shadow. From the start, love came with conditions, and I never seemed to meet them. For years I endured it. Every Sunday, the Wilson family gathered around an endless dining table, polished to perfection. My parents perched at the head like royalty. Diane basked in their admiration, and I sat quietly with my children, hoping for crumbs of recognition. Those dinners drained me, yet I told myself they mattered, that my kids deserved connection with their grandparents, even if it cost us pieces of our dignity. But last month something shifted. That night began like so many others. My children, Lily and Jason, dressed carefully, nervous about saying the wrong thing. I carried a homemade dessert because I had been taught never to arrive empty-handed. I reminded myself to keep my voice even, to smile politely, to absorb the tiny cuts of sarcasm without bleeding. I thought I could handle it. Then came the dinner order. A moment so ordinary it should have meant nothing. My parents, seated like judges on their thrones, asked Diane's children what they wanted to eat. Sushi with gold flakes, pasta with truffle sauce, desserts from the most expensive restaurants in town. My father wrote down each request in his leather notebook, nodding with approval. My mother beamed at her grandchildren as if they were royalty making decrees. I waited. My children waited. Lily's eyes lit up when she heard pasta. Jason whispered to me about ordering a hamburger. They believed they would be asked next. They believed they mattered. But the silence stretched on. I felt my pulse hammer in my ears. I knew what was coming, but nothing prepared me for the words. My mother lifted her glass, looked directly at me, and said coldly, "Your kids can eat whatever scraps are left in the kitchen. They are not guests here." Time stopped. Jason's hand gripped mine. Lily's shoulders stiffened, and in that frozen silence, I understood something I had ignored for too long. This was never about family. This was about control. A hierarchy designed to remind us that we were less, that we should accept less, and that we should be grateful for the chance to exist in their orbit. I realized in that instant that I had a choice. I could swallow my pride yet again and teach my children to accept humiliation as normal, or I could break the pattern. That dinner order was not just about food, it was about worth, and for the first time in my life, I decided my children and I were worth more than scraps. This is the story of how I walked out of that mansion, how secrets unraveled, and how the balance of power in my family shifted forever. I remember standing there, stunned by my mother's words, while my children's hopeful faces fell. In that moment, I had to steady my breath. My name is Amelia, and I want you to walk with me through what happened that night. Because if you have ever been pushed aside by the people who were supposed to love you the most, you will understand exactly why a takeout order nearly broke me. Before I dive deeper, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from tonight? Tell me in the comments, because I want to know how far this story reaches. And if you have ever felt the weight of toxic family expectations, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of this journey. Sometimes the only way to survive is to share our stories. And together we make sure no one feels alone. Growing up, my parents built a world that looked flawless to outsiders. My father, Richard Wilson, ran a real estate empire in Connecticut. My mother, Eleanor, perfected the image of a society matron. Our home was 7 bedrooms of grandeur, with a pool house and staff who moved silently in the background. But inside that house, affection was scarce, and loyalty was measured by obedience. Diane, 4 years older than me, had the look my mother adored: blonde hair, green eyes, the image of her youth. She could charm anyone with a smile. Every ballet recital was a family event. Every school project of hers was treated like fine art and framed in the main hallway. Even her smallest achievements became grand celebrations. And me? I was the reliable one. Brown hair, hazel eyes, a mirror of my grandmother whom my mother barely tolerated. My victories were dismissed with lines like, "That's what we expect from you, Amelia. No parties, no framed certificates, just expectations." When I earned a full scholarship to Columbia to study education, my parents offered no congratulations. Instead, they wondered aloud why I was aiming so modestly. Meanwhile, Diane scraped into Yale, her tuition and lifestyle paid in full. When she married Bradley, a finance executive from another wealthy family, her wedding sparkled with extravagance. My engagement to Thomas, a kind but hard-working architect, was met with my mother's first question. "Will you be signing a prenuptial agreement?" She had never asked Diane that. This favoritism carried on for decades, shaping every Sunday dinner. At first, I told myself it was easier to endure the comparisons, the subtle insults, the way my children were treated as afterthoughts. I wanted Lily and Jason to know their grandparents, even if those moments came wrapped in coldness. But here's the thing about wounds. Even small cuts, repeated over years, leave scars. My children were learning more than table manners in that mansion. They were learning that love could be conditional, that their worth could be measured by silence or scraps. And I, by staying quiet, was teaching them to accept it. That is why what happened with the takeout order was so devastating. It was not about sushi or pasta, it was about power. It was about who belonged and who did not. And on that night, I realized I was done teaching my children to shrink. I looked at Lily's hands clutching the drawing she had made for her grandmother, hours of work, ignored with a wave. I thought of Jason's eagerness to share his science experiments, met only with silence, and I knew, with a clarity that shook me, that the cycle had to break here. I had spent my whole life watching Diane float through a world built by my parents, while I struggled to prove my worth. But I no longer needed their approval. What mattered now were the two little faces beside me, waiting to see if I would protect them or betray them by staying silent again. So I took a deep breath, and I decided the story was going to change. As I sat in that lavish living room, staring at my sister's children lounging on the cream sofa, my mind drifted back to my own childhood. My name is Amelia, and if you want to understand why that dinner cut so deep, you need to see how the stage had been set long before. Diane was always the shining star in my parents' eyes. When she painted a picture in kindergarten, it was framed in gold and hung in the hallway for guests to admire. When she danced at her ballet recital, my parents hired a photographer, ordered flowers, and made the evening feel like a royal gala. If she scored a B on a test, it was treated like a triumph, proof of her brilliance. I, on the other hand, could win an entire academic competition and receive nothing but a nod. "That's what we expect from you, Amelia," my father would say, before turning back to his newspaper. There were no parties, no celebrations, no framed certificates on the wall. My achievements were invisible in the house where I grew up. I can still remember one birthday. Diane had asked for a pony, and though it was absurd, my parents arranged for her to take riding lessons at a stable nearby. She wore new boots and a helmet, glowing with joy as the camera clicked over and over. That same year, I asked for a set of books. My mother told me not to be greedy. "You already read too much," she said. On my birthday, I got a sweater that was 2 sizes too big, clearly something she had picked up last minute. I wore it anyway, because even as a child, I understood that gratitude was expected, no matter how small the gesture. The imbalance only grew sharper with age. Diane learned quickly that her smile could get her anything. I learned that silence was my safest shield. When guests visited, my parents paraded Diane out to perform singing, dancing, showing off her paintings. I was told to help the staff, to make sure the lemonade was cold, to stay out of the way. Those lessons stayed with me. By the time we reached high school, Diane was the center of every celebration. I worked late nights studying, winning debate tournaments, taking home medals. My mother would glance at them and murmur, "That's nice," before tucking them in a drawer. Meanwhile, Diane's ribbon from a local art fair was displayed above the fireplace. It hurt, but I learned to swallow it. And swallowing it became habit. Even now, decades later, I can still feel the sting of watching my sister's smallest accomplishments turn into spectacles while mine were treated like obligations. It built a script inside me. One where I was expected to endure, to hold everything together, to be the responsible one while Diane basked in endless attention. Looking at my children that night, I saw history repeating. Lily, with her shy smile and careful drawing for her grandmother, brushed aside. Jason, always curious, dismissed as a nuisance. It was the same script, replayed with a new generation, and I knew if I stayed silent, I would be handing them the same chains I had carried since childhood. The truth is, the favoritism had always been obvious. But until that night, I had convinced myself I could live with it, that it was better to let it pass than to make waves. After all, hadn't I survived? Hadn't I built a life despite it? But sitting there, I realized survival was not enough. My children deserved more. They deserved to know that their voices mattered, that their achievements counted, that their mother would stand for them, even against the family she came from. And once I admitted that, there was no going back. Adulthood did not free me from the script that had been written in childhood. If anything, it carved the lines even deeper. My name is Amelia, and by the time I was old enough to make my own choices, the gap between Diane and me had become a canyon. Diane's path was paved in gold. She attended Yale, though her grades were average at best. My parents sent her off with a generous allowance every month, enough to cover designer clothes, sorority fees, and weekend trips. She floated through college without worry, returning home with stories of parties, vacations, and endless indulgence. My parents listened with rapt attention, smiling as if she were royalty reporting from abroad. I earned a full scholarship to Columbia. I carried the weight of responsibility, studying education because I wanted to give children what I never had. Encouragement, patience, belief. When I told my parents, my father frowned. Teaching is modest, he said. With your background, you could aim higher. They didn't see the pride I felt. They only saw limits. The contrast sharpened after graduation. Diane married Bradley, a finance executive from another wealthy family. Their wedding was a spectacle, costing more than most people's homes. The society pages covered it, photographs of her in a silk gown and diamond tiara filling columns. Guests whispered about the opulence. My parents glowed with pride, calling it the event of the year. When I got engaged to Thomas, a kind and hard-working architect, my mother's first words were not congratulations. They were, "Will you be signing a prenuptial agreement?" She had never asked Diane that. The message was clear. I was expected to protect myself from betrayal, because no one believed my love story was worthy of trust. Diane and Bradley received a starter home from my parents as a wedding gift. I started married life in a small apartment with second-hand furniture. But in that space, I felt real love. Thomas and I dreamed of building a future together, even if it lacked glamour. We spent evenings planning, laughing, believing we were different from the scripted roles our families had forced on us. Meanwhile, Diane slipped deeper into a charmed existence. She didn't work. She spent her days at charity galas and social clubs, her photographs appearing in glossy newsletters. My parents funded their lifestyle with quiet checks, subsidizing vacations, new cars, and endless luxuries. Every time Diane walked into a room, she carried the aura of entitlement that came from never knowing struggle. I chose a different path. I became an elementary school teacher. The pay was modest, but the fulfillment was immense. Every time a child's face lit up as they learned something new, I felt wealthier than Diane ever could. But my parents never saw it that way. They pitied me, called my life small, and whispered about how I could have done better. Looking back, adulthood revealed the cruel symmetry of our roles. Diane was celebrated for simply existing. I was dismissed even when I worked twice as hard. And yet, for all the glitter in Diane's life, there was a hollowness I could not ignore. Behind her flawless makeup and endless wardrobe, I sensed a woman who had never built anything for herself. She relied on our parents' approval like oxygen, terrified of losing it. I, on the other hand, had built my own life brick by brick. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That difference became clear later, when my marriage unraveled. But in those years, I still clung to the hope that maybe, if I stayed patient, my parents would eventually see me not as a shadow, not as the responsible one, but as their daughter worthy of love in her own right. Of course, I was wrong. I thought I had built something unshakable with Thomas. We didn't have the riches Diane flaunted, but we had love, laughter, and plans for the future. At least, that's what I believed. My name is Amelia, and this is the part of the story where the ground gave way beneath my feet. 3 years ago, my world collapsed. I discovered Thomas was having an affair with a woman from his office. The truth came in fragments, late nights he couldn't explain, whispers on the phone, then finally, undeniable proof. I confronted him, my voice shaking, hoping there was still some mistake. But he confessed, and in a matter of weeks, our marriage was over. The divorce was swift and brutal, papers signed, promises broken. He left, leaving behind not only me but also 2 young children who adored their father. Lily was 7 then, Jason only 5. I will never forget the look in their eyes when I explained that Daddy would not be living with us anymore. Their questions cut deeper than any legal document. "Did we do something wrong, Mom?" Jason asked. And my heart shattered because I could not protect them from that pain. Thomas was ordered to pay child support, but it came late more often than not, and never enough to cover the basics. I took on extra shifts, teaching summer school, tutoring on the side. Our modest apartment became the place where I balanced bills, stretched every dollar, and whispered promises to my children that I would make it work somehow. You might think my parents stepped in. They had the resources to help. But instead of offering support, they offered judgment. My mother shook her head. "You should have tried harder to make the marriage work." My father asked why Thomas had strayed, as if I had invited betrayal into my own home. Their sympathy extended only to Diane, who never lifted a finger but was showered with concern if she so much as sneezed. It was in those lonely nights that I began to see myself clearly. I realized I could survive without my parents' approval, without their money, without Thomas. I realized my strength came not from them but from the 2 children sleeping in the next room, depending on me. Lily inherited my love of books. She could spend hours curled up with a novel, drawing characters in the margins, creating stories of her own. Jason was my little scientist, forever taking things apart and asking how they worked. Teachers at school praised their manners, their curiosity, their kindness. Every parent conference reminded me that I was raising good humans despite the chaos. That was my real wealth. And yet, Sunday dinners continued. My parents insisted on the tradition, and I told myself it was important for my children to maintain ties with family. I endured the cutting remarks, the comparisons to Diane's privileged children, the endless reminders that we were outsiders in a home that should have been ours too. There were moments I wanted to scream, to demand respect, to walk out and never return, but I stayed. Because I thought being present mattered more than protecting myself. Because I thought enduring humiliation was somehow noble. Looking back, I see the truth. What I was teaching Lily and Jason was not resilience. It was acceptance of disrespect. It was silence in the face of cruelty. And that realization haunts me. Let me ask you this. If you had been in my place, raising 2 children alone, balancing bills, enduring a family that refused to see your worth, would you have stayed for the sake of appearances, or would you have walked away sooner? Tell me in the comments, because your perspective matters. This question has lived in my heart for years, and it is the very question that made the moment of the takeout order so devastating, because by then, I had endured so much, and I thought I could handle anything. But I was wrong. That night would prove to me that there are limits, even to endurance. Every Sunday dinner was supposed to be about family, togetherness, tradition. That is what my mother always said. But for me, Amelia, those dinners became a stage where favoritism played out under the glow of chandeliers and the clinking of crystal glasses. The tradition began when both Diane and I had children. My parents insisted it was important to gather weekly, to strengthen bonds, to pass on values. At first I believed them. I thought maybe if Lily and Jason saw their grandparents regularly, they would feel loved. Maybe it would give them a sense of belonging. But what those dinners really gave them was a front-row seat to inequality. Diane's children, Zach and Madison, always arrived like royalty. Brand new gadgets in hand, designer clothes that screamed luxury. They ran through the mansion, interrupting adults, knocking over fragile antiques without consequence. "Kids will be kids," my mother would laugh, as the staff cleaned up the mess. My children entered quietly, dressed in clothes I had saved for, often second-hand but clean and neatly pressed. They carried themselves with the manners I taught them: say please, say thank you, offer help. When dishes needed clearing, Lily and Jason volunteered. The response was always the same: "We have staff for that, dear." A dismissal wrapped in politeness, reminding them they were not expected to contribute, only to disappear. The food itself told the story. Diane's children could demand special meals. If Zach wanted steak, steak appeared. If Madison wanted fresh strawberries in winter, they were flown in. My children ate what was served without complaint, grateful just to be included. And then came the remarks. Always subtle, always with a smile. "That top is very practical, Amelia. I suppose teachers must be economical with their wardrobes." Or, "The children look healthy, even without those expensive extracurriculars." My parents turned back to Diane, glowing with pride over her European vacations, her cultured children, her endless indulgences paid for by them. I endured it. Week after week, month after month, year after year. Each dinner chipped away at me, but I told myself it was worth it. I convinced myself that family connection mattered more than my pride. I swallowed insults like bitter wine and tried to smile through the taste. But what I did not realize then was that my children were watching. They saw their cousins rewarded for rudeness while their own politeness went unnoticed. They saw me shrink, holding my tongue while Diane bragged about spa trips funded by my parents. They learned that silence was expected, that love could be conditional, that respect was a luxury not everyone received. Those dinners shaped them in ways I did not want to admit. Lily stopped bringing her drawings because no one looked at them. Jason stopped talking about his science experiments because no one listened. My children learned to sit on the edge of the love seat, posture perfect, hands folded, waiting to be acknowledged. That realization haunts me. Because I thought I was teaching resilience. But what I was teaching was acceptance of disrespect. The imbalance grew worse over time. My parents funded a 3-week vacation for Diane as a mental health break. I worked summer school to afford new clothes for Lily and Jason. My parents beamed at Diane's tales of French cafes and Italian beaches, while ignoring the fact that my children had never seen the ocean. By the time of that fateful dinner, the resentment had built up like storm clouds. I had swallowed my pride for so long, I forgot what it felt like to breathe freely. I told myself I could endure anything. But I was wrong, because sometimes it takes only a small spark to ignite the fire, and in my case it was a takeout order. The turning point came disguised as something small. My daughter Lily, 10 years old, carried a drawing to my parents' mansion that Sunday evening. She had worked on it all week, a family portrait. Every detail mattered: the brooch my mother always wore, the curve of the staircase in the grand hall, even the exact shade of my father's silver hair. When we arrived, the housekeeper Marjorie greeted us warmly, the only one who ever truly did. Inside, the air was tense. Diane lounged on the sofa, flipping her hair. My parents sat in their usual thrones, crystal glasses in hand. Lily stepped forward, clutching her drawing. Her voice trembled. "I made this for you, Grandma." She offered it with both hands, eyes shining with hope. My mother barely glanced at it. She pinched the paper between 2 fingers, as if it might soil her silk blouse. "How creative," she said flatly. Then she handed it to Marjorie. "Put it somewhere safe." Somewhere safe meant a drawer, forgotten, hidden. While Lily's face fell, my mother turned and beamed at Madison, Diane's daughter, who had just unwrapped an antique doll from the hall closet. My heart clenched as Lily stood there, her work dismissed, her worth ignored. Jason, my little scientist, hovered beside me. He watched Zach demonstrate a new gaming tablet to my father. Something expensive, something shiny. My father nodded with interest, something he had never once shown when Jason talked about experiments or inventions. That was the moment I saw it clearly. The cycle was repeating. My children were living my childhood all over again, ignored, dismissed, erased. And then, the takeout order sealed it. My parents, for the first time ever, decided not to cook. They asked Diane's children what they wanted. Sushi with gold flakes, pasta with truffle sauce, imported sparkling water. My father wrote every detail in his gold notebook. He nodded, pleased. Lily's eyes widened with hope. Jason whispered to me about hamburgers. They waited for their turn. But the silence was deafening. No one asked them. I held my breath, waiting for someone to notice. Finally, I gently prompted, Lily, Jason, what would you like to eat? Before they could answer, my mother waved her manicured hand. Your kids can eat scraps from the kitchen. They are not guests here. The words slammed into me like a physical blow. Jason gripped my hand. Lily froze, eyes wide. Diane laughed, tossing her hair. Don't forget, Amelia. I'll be staying all week. You can cover my meals too. Something inside me broke. Years of swallowing my pride, years of telling myself family mattered no matter the cost. Suddenly I saw it for what it was. Abuse dressed up as tradition, humiliation disguised as connection. I looked at my children, and in that moment, I realized I was teaching them something dangerous. That love required silence, that respect was optional, that their worth could be defined by others. No more. I took their hands. Lily, Jason, we're leaving. My voice was calm, steady, but inside, my heart thundered. My father barked. Sit down, Amelia. Stop overreacting. We have important family finances to discuss after dinner. My mother smirked, cold as ice. You always make a scene. The children can eat sandwiches. Stop being dramatic. Diane rolled her eyes. Here comes the martyr act. Poor Amelia. I stood my ground. No. That's your life. Not ours. Not anymore. And here's where I will leave you hanging for a moment, because what happened next unraveled everything I thought I knew about my family. Secrets came to light. Power shifted. And for the first time in my life, I walked out of that mansion with my head held high. If you want to know how standing up that night set off a chain reaction that changed not only my life, but also my family's future, stay with me. Trust me, the storm had only just begun. The air in the room thickened the moment I stood. My fingers tightened around Lily and Jason's hands, their small palms damp with fear. My father's sharp voice cut through the silence. Sit down, Amelia. This childish display is embarrassing. His words were not new, but this time they carried no weight. I had already made my decision. My mother's smile was icy, her eyes narrowing like daggers. You always overreact. Stop making a spectacle. The children can have sandwiches. It is not as if they appreciate fine cuisine. Jason's grip on me tightened. I looked at him and saw confusion, but also trust. He was waiting to see if I would protect him. That trust gave me strength. Diane smirked from the sofa. Here we go again. Poor Amelia, always the martyr. Just accept it. Some people matter more than others. That's life. Her words hit like poison, but I did not flinch. I turned to her, my voice steady. No, Diane, that's your life, but it will not be my children's. I guided Lily and Jason toward the door. The marble floor seemed to echo each step louder than the last. My father's voice thundered behind me. We are not finished here. You will regret this. We have important matters to discuss after dinner. I paused in the hallway, my children's wide eyes on me. I am sure you do, I said without turning back. But they will have to wait. Respect comes before business. That was when I saw Diane blocking the doorway. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed, her expression smug but her eyes betraying something else. Fear. You know, she said casually, they only invited you today because they need something from you. Her words froze me. What are you talking about? They were going to ask you to let me and the kids stay with you for a while, she said, examining her nails. But I told them you would never agree unless they broke you down first. The pieces began to click. The tension in the room, the suitcases in the hall, the sudden generosity of Takeout. My parents' unusual behavior. It was all part of a plan. Stay with me? I asked, stunned. Why would you need to stay with me? Diane's jaw tightened. Bradley's company is restructuring. He's gone for now. Just some temporary financial adjustments. Nothing serious. Before I could respond, my father's voice thundered again from behind her. Amelia, stop this nonsense immediately. Your sister needs your help. As family, you are obligated to provide it. The absurdity almost made me laugh. My two-bedroom apartment, the one they mocked as a shoebox, was suddenly good enough for Diane? The same parents who dismissed my children as unworthy now demanded loyalty? I shook my head slowly. You want me to take them in? After everything, after telling my kids they deserve scraps, you expect me to open my home? My mother appeared in the hall now, her face flushed. You are being selfish, Amelia. Your sister is in a delicate position. Think of the children. I looked down at Lily and Jason. Their small bodies leaned against me, waiting for my choice. My children deserved more than this twisted cycle of loyalty, defined by humiliation. I bent to their level, my voice gentle. Go get your jackets. We are going to have a special dinner somewhere else tonight. Their eyes widened, half in disbelief, half in relief. Are you sure, Mom? Lily whispered. I smiled. I have never been more sure. As they hurried off with Marjorie's quiet help, I straightened and faced my parents. If you want to discuss Diane staying with me, you can call tomorrow. Ask me properly, with respect, like you would ask anyone else. Diane scoffed. She's actually leaving. I told you she's impossible now. My father's face turned red, his voice booming. If you leave this house tonight, don't expect our help when you need it. Family loyalty is not something you discard when it is inconvenient. I met his glare with calm I had never felt before. You never helped me. Not when Thomas left. Not when I needed childcare. Not when Lily needed braces. All I ever received from you was judgment and disdain. That ends tonight. And with those words, I stepped into the night air with my children. The mansion loomed behind us, cold and imposing. Jason tugged my sleeve. Are we in trouble, Mom? I knelt down, holding his small shoulders. No, sweetheart. We are finally out of trouble. I did not know what awaited us beyond those gates. But for the first time in years, I felt free. When I closed the heavy front door of the mansion behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. The night air was cool, brushing against my face like a reminder that freedom was real. Lily and Jason walked beside me, their steps unsure, their faces a mix of worry and relief. We climbed into our old Honda, its engine groaning in protest, but it started. That sound felt like a victory. As we drove away from the iron gates, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The mansion grew smaller with every turn until it disappeared completely. Jason's small voice broke the silence. Are we in trouble, Mom? I smiled at him through the mirror. No, sweetheart. We're finally out of trouble. The road stretched out ahead of us, and for the first time, I didn't want to return to our modest apartment just yet. I wanted to show my children something different. Something that would prove their worth was not defined by scraps. My heart beat faster as an idea formed. How would you two feel about dinner at Morton's Steakhouse tonight? Their gasps filled the car. Morton's was the kind of place we passed on the way to school. The kind of place we dreamed about but never entered. Jason's eyes widened. Really? They have hamburgers, right? Lily whispered. Isn't it super expensive? Yes, it is, I admitted. But tonight is special. Tonight we remind ourselves who we are. When we arrived, the valet looked surprised at our old car, but he opened the door with the same flourish he gave the Mercedes in front of us. Inside, the golden light of chandeliers reflected against polished wood. A hostess greeted us, her smile faltering slightly at our Sunday clothes. For a second, I worried. But then she checked her tablet. You're in luck. We just had a cancellation. We can seat you in 15 minutes. Relief washed over me. We waited in the lobby, surrounded by suits and dresses far finer than ours. Jason whispered. This place is fancy. Lily held my hand tighter, still unsure. I bent down to her level. Tonight we belong here, just like anyone else. When we were seated at a table draped in white linen, a waiter introduced himself warmly. Jason ordered a hamburger with truffle aioli and aged cheddar, the biggest burger he had ever seen. Lily chose grilled salmon with roasted vegetables. I ordered chicken, modest but comforting. As the food arrived, I watched their faces light up. Jason's eyes widened. "This is the biggest hamburger I've ever seen." Lily pointed at the garnish. "My salmon has flowers on it." They laughed, their voices free for the first time that day. I lifted my glass of wine, something I rarely allowed myself. "To us," I said softly. "To new beginnings." As I watched them eat, I realized something painful. For years I had taught them to tolerate disrespect, to sit quietly while others were praised, to accept less than they deserved. But tonight, I was teaching them something new, that they were worthy, that their voices mattered, that their mother would fight for them. And that brings me to you. What would you have done in my shoes? If you had been told your children were only worth scraps, would you have walked out? Or would you have stayed for the sake of keeping peace? Share your thoughts in the comments, because I know so many people carry stories like mine, hidden behind closed doors. As the meal went on, Jason relaxed into laughter, Lily told stories from school, and I realized this was more than dinner. This was a declaration. We were rewriting our story, one bite at a time. But I had no idea that leaving the mansion that night had only opened the first door. Secrets were waiting for me, secrets about my family's money, Diane's marriage, and the empire my father built. The truth would come crashing down sooner than I could imagine. By the time dessert arrived at Morton's, the weight in my chest had begun to lift. Lily and Jason were sharing a massive chocolate cake, their laughter echoing in the dim light. Watching them, I felt something I hadn't, in years, peace. But beneath that peace was a gnawing thought. This couldn't be the end. Walking out of the mansion had freed me, but the story wasn't finished. I excused myself and stepped into the elegant restroom, its marble counters gleaming under soft light. My reflection stared back at me, tired eyes, trembling hands, but a woman standing taller than before. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My parents had called more than a dozen times already, their names flashing across the screen like alarms. I silenced them and scrolled instead to a number I hadn't dialed in years. Patricia Montgomery. My godmother. She had been my mother's college roommate, once her closest friend, until some falling out pushed them apart. Still, Patricia never disappeared completely. She sent birthday cards, graduation gifts, even letters when I went off to Columbia. My parents dismissed her as eccentric, but in her words I always felt genuine care. The phone rang 3 times before her warm voice answered. "Anne, is that you, dear?" Hearing her say my name broke something inside me. "Yes, it's me. I hope it's not too late." "Never too late to hear from you," she said gently. "But you sound upset." And so it poured out of me. The years of favoritism, the cold remarks, the humiliation at Sunday dinners, tonight's cruelty my children told to eat scraps. I told her everything, my voice shaking as though confessing a crime. When I finished, there was silence. I feared I had said too much. Finally Patricia spoke, her tone steady. "I've been waiting for this call for a very long time." I froze. "You knew?" "Of course I knew. Why do you think your mother and I stopped speaking?" I confronted her about the way she treated you. I told her that a mother's love must balance favoritism, not deepen it. She told me never to interfere again. I couldn't risk losing you completely, so I stayed on the edges of your life, sending gifts, watching from afar. Tears blurred my vision. All these years, I thought no one noticed, but Patricia had. She lowered her voice. "And now, you must know something else. Your father's empire is crumbling. He's been hiding it, but I've seen the numbers. That mansion has been refinanced multiple times. They are 3 months behind on their payments to me." My heart stopped. "To you?" "Yes, dear. I hold their mortgage. The banks would not touch them after the last collapse. I agreed to step in, but only because I wanted to see if, when the walls closed in, they would finally treat you as equal family. Tonight proves the answer is no, they never will." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. So Diane's staying with me isn't just about Bradley's business trip, Patricia said sharply. He left her. Her home is in foreclosure because she secretly mortgaged it to pay off her debts. They are not asking for help out of love. They are cornered. They need you. And they plan to break you down until you said yes. I gripped the counter, my pulse roaring in my ears. The suitcases by the hall, the strange tension, the sudden decision to order takeout. It all fit. My family hadn't invited me to dinner. They had set a trap. Patricia's voice softened. Anne, I don't want you to struggle anymore. I have no heirs. I want to set up a trust for you and the children. $5 million to start. Enough for a new home, their education, your freedom. Patricia, I didn't call to ask for money, I whispered, horrified that she might think I had. I know you didn't, she said firmly. That's why I want to give it. You've carried this burden long enough. It's time you and your children lived without fear. I pressed the phone to my ear, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time, I wasn't the one begging for scraps. I wasn't powerless. My family's empire was collapsing, and I held something they could never control, my integrity, and now, the chance to choose. I returned to the table, where Lily and Jason licked chocolate from their forks, their eyes bright. My phone buzzed again with calls from my parents and Diane. I silenced it without hesitation. Everything okay, Mom? Lily asked. I smiled, my voice steady. Better than okay, sweetheart. Everything is about to change. The next morning, sunlight streamed weakly through the curtains of our small apartment. It should have felt like any other Monday, but nothing about this day was ordinary. My name is Amelia, and as I stood in my modest kitchen making coffee, I knew the balance of my life was shifting. The night before, I had silenced 27 missed calls and 43 text messages from my parents and Diane. Their tone had changed from scolding to pleading. They wanted me back at the mansion. They wanted to talk, but I was done being summoned like a servant. This time, I would choose the terms. At 9 o'clock sharp, a knock rattled the door. My heart jumped. For a second, I feared it was my father, furious and demanding. But when I opened the door, there stood Patricia. She was elegant in a navy pantsuit, her silver hair neatly styled. Beside her was a serious-looking man carrying a leather briefcase. "Good morning, my dear," Patricia greeted warmly, pulling me into a hug. "This is Mr. Greenberg, my attorney. I hope you don't mind, but after our conversation last night, I thought it best to move quickly." I ushered them inside. Our apartment was small, cluttered with school projects and laundry, but Patricia's eyes sparkled with approval. "A home filled with love always feels bigger," she said, settling at the kitchen table. Mr. Greenberg opened his case and neatly arranged a stack of documents. Patricia sipped her coffee, then leaned forward. "Anne, after hearing what you've endured, I decided there's no reason to wait. I've instructed Mr. Greenberg to establish a trust for you and the children immediately." My pulse quickened. "Patricia, she raised her hand. "You don't need to protest. This is not charity. This is justice long overdue. $5 million will be placed in a trust. It will cover housing, education, healthcare. You will be the trustee with full control. And there will be more later. For now, this is your freedom." I gripped my coffee mug to steady myself. $5 million. It was a number I had only ever seen in newspapers or movies. It was more than a safety net, it was a lifeline. Mr. Greenberg slid the papers toward me. "All standard, Mrs. Wilson. You can review every detail, but it essentially gives you autonomy over the funds." My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. For so long, every dollar had been a battle. I had cut coupons, skipped meals, postponed buying shoes for Lily, and now, in front of me, was the end of that struggle. Before I could process it fully, another knock thundered against the door. This one was harsher, impatient. I froze. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Greenberg closed his briefcase quickly, sensing trouble. I opened the door a crack. My parents stood there, flanked by Diane and her children. My father looked disheveled, his suit jacket missing, his hair unkempt. My mother's perfect composure was gone, Her hair was unstyled, her eyes red. Diane's face was streaked with dried tears, her designer blouse wrinkled. Her children clung to her, confused and cranky. "We need to talk," my father barked, trying to push past me. I stepped into the doorway, blocking him. "This is not a good time." My mother's gaze darted past me, and when she spotted Patricia at the table with the attorney, her face paled. "So it's true," she whispered. "You've aligned yourself with her." Patricia rose smoothly, her presence commanding. "Eleanor, Richard, Diane. What a surprise. I was just explaining to Amelia the new financial arrangements." My father's face turned scarlet. "This is a family matter, Patricia. You have no right to interfere." "I gained the right when you mortgaged your property to me," Patricia replied coolly. "And when you defaulted," Diane's voice cracked. "Anne, please, you have to help us. They're going to take everything. Where are my children supposed to live?" For the first time, I truly saw her, not the golden child, but a woman unraveling, terrified. I glanced at Lily and Jason, who hovered in the hall, watching everything. I thought of the night before, of chocolate cake and laughter, of the promise I made them. I turned back to my family. "This time," I said firmly, "we will have this conversation on my terms, not yours." The room fell silent. And for the first time in my life, the power belonged to me. We all gathered in my cramped living room, the air so heavy it felt like a storm about to break. My father sat stiffly in the armchair, his jaw clenched, while my mother dabbed her eyes with a crumpled handkerchief. Diane perched on the edge of the sofa, wringing her hands, her children in the bedroom with Lily and Jason. Patricia remained calm, poised, her attorney silently watching. I crossed my arms and faced them. "Before anything else, I want the truth. No more lies. No more manipulation. Tell me exactly what's going on." For a moment, no one spoke. Then my father cleared his throat. "Our business has faced setbacks." "Setbacks?" I repeated sharply. "Or collapse?" His eyes flickered, and I knew I'd struck the truth. Patricia stepped in, her voice even. "Richard, enough word games. Amelia deserves to know." My father's shoulders slumped, and for the first time in my life, he looked small. "The company has been operating in the red for years. We made some bad investments, tried to hold appearances, but it caught up with us. The mansion, it isn't ours anymore. Patricia holds the mortgage. We're months behind." My breath caught. The empire I grew up under, the wealth used to keep me silent, was nothing but smoke and mirrors. "And Diane?" I asked, turning to her. She looked down, her voice trembling. "Bradley left. He found out I remortgaged our house to pay off debt. $500,000 in credit cards. It's gone. The house is gone too." Silence filled the room. I thought about all the years I had been dismissed, judged for my modest life, treated as if I were small. And now, here they were, stripped of their armor, facing me with nothing left. My mother broke down then, her voice desperate. "Amelia, you don't understand. We did what we had to do for Diane. She's always needed more support. You were always stronger. You didn't need us the same way." Her words cut deeper than any insult ever had. I had been denied love not because I was unworthy, but because I was too strong to need it. A lifetime of cold shoulders justified by twisted reasoning. I looked at Lily and Jason peeking from the hallway, their eyes wide. I realized this was bigger than me. This was about showing my children that strength does not mean silence, and love should never be conditional. I turned back to my parents. "So let me be clear. You want me to house Diane and her children, to rescue you, after you told my kids to eat scraps. You expect loyalty now?" My father's face reddened. "We are family. You owe us." I took a breath, steadying myself. "No. Family loyalty goes both ways, and you never showed it when I needed you." Patricia nodded approvingly, her presence steady at my back. "Here is where I'll pause and turn to you, the one listening to my story. What would you do if you were me? If your parents, after years of favoritism and cruelty, came begging when their empire collapsed, would you help them? Or would you finally shut the door? Tell me in the comments, because I want to know how you see this moment. The conversation that followed in my living room that day would change everything. Boundaries would be drawn, lines crossed, and for the first time, I would speak with the authority they never expected me to have. And then came the twist, because helping them on my terms was not the same as surrendering. The silence after my question was unbearable. My parents stared at me as though I had grown a second head. Diane avoided my eyes, twisting the strap of her purse, shame written all over her face. Patricia sat tall and calm, her very presence daring me to claim the power I had always denied myself. I drew in a deep breath and spoke, my voice steady. I am willing to help, but on my terms, not yours. My father's brow furrowed. Your terms? He said it like the words were foreign. Yes, I replied firmly. Diane and her children can stay with me for 2 weeks, only 2 weeks. During that time, they will respect my home and my children. After that, I will help find them affordable housing and connect them with financial counseling. But this, I gestured between us. This pattern of control and humiliation ends now. The room went still. My father's face darkened with rage. You cannot be serious. 2 weeks? Financial counseling? Do you have any idea who you are speaking to? Yes, I answered, meeting his glare. I am speaking to family members who need my help, but who never once showed me basic respect. Those are my boundaries. Accept them, or leave. My mother pressed a trembling hand to her chest. Amelia, how dare you speak to us this way? After everything we've done, I cut her off. Everything you've done? Let's list it. You ignored my accomplishments. You dismissed my career. You treated my children like outsiders. You gave Diane a house, a lifestyle, endless support. And you gave me nothing but criticism. So no, Mother. You don't get to stand here and act as though I owe you anything. Diane's voice cracked then, small and uncertain. She's right, she whispered. Everyone turned to her. Her green eyes, once always so confident, brimmed with tears. Anne's right. I've leaned on you, on all of you, my whole life. I never built anything of my own. I don't even know how. Her voice broke, and for the first time in years, I saw my sister not as the golden child, but as a woman drowning in her own illusions. For a moment, my anger softened. Not toward my parents, they had created this mess, but toward Diane. I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. Because beneath the diamonds and designer clothes, she was hollow. Still, I didn't bend. 2 weeks, I repeated. No more. And you will treat my children with respect in my home, or you will leave sooner. My father looked like he might explode. His pride had always been his armor, and now it cracked. For the first time, he had no leverage, no wealth to dangle over me. My mother dabbed at her eyes, whispering, How did we get here? Patricia finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. You got here by refusing to love both your daughters equally. You built an empire on appearances and forgot that families are built on respect. Now you face the consequences. I let out a long breath. Saying those words, claiming those boundaries, was like breaking chains I didn't even know I still carried. That night, when Diane and her children moved into our apartment temporarily, it was crowded and uncomfortable. But for the first time, I felt no resentment, because this time, it was on my terms. And my children watched me claim the power I had denied for far too long. 6 months can change everything. If you had told me back on that night, when I walked out of my parents' mansion with my children's hands in mine, that my life would look like this now, I would not have believed you. But here I am, Amelia, sitting on the deck of my new home, watching Lily and Jason laugh in the backyard, their voices mingling with the sound of birds and summer wind. Patricia kept her word. Within weeks, the trust was established. $5 million, a number I still whisper sometimes, as though saying it too loudly will wake me from a dream. With her guidance, I purchased a 4-bedroom house in a safe neighborhood with a good school district. It has a garden where Lily paints at a little easel, where Jason plants experiments in the soil. It is ours, and it feels like freedom. The first weeks were difficult. Diane and her children stayed in my apartment for the agreed 2 weeks. The space was cramped, tensions ran high, and old resentments simmered. But something unexpected happened. Late at night, when the children were asleep and the walls between us couldn't hide the truth, Diane broke down. She admitted she had always envied me, envied my independence, my ability to build a life without leaning on our parents' money. "I thought you were stronger," she confessed through tears. "I thought you didn't need what I needed." It was not reconciliation. Not yet. But it was the first honest conversation we had ever had as sisters. Eventually, Diane found a modest apartment within her budget. She took a job at a boutique clothing store, her natural charm finally put to use in something real. For the first time, she came home with stories not about galas or vacations, but about customers she had helped, outfits she had created. I saw glimpses of pride in her that money could never buy. My parents, forced to downsize, moved into a condominium. My father retired after his business collapsed completely. At first, the humiliation nearly destroyed him. But with no empire left to manage, he found himself in a woodworking shop, shaping tables and chairs with his hands. My mother, robbed of her mansion and her status, turned reluctantly toward community volunteering. At first, she complained endlessly. But over time, I noticed her voice change when she spoke of helping children with reading programs or organizing food drives. She discovered a purpose she had never known outside appearances. The shift wasn't perfect. Old habits still surfaced. My mother occasionally compared Lily's drawings to Madison's, or my father still ignored Jason's stories in favor of Zach's louder voice. But here was the difference. I didn't stay silent anymore, and neither did my children. Lily would gently say, "Grandpa, I'm talking too." And Jason would proudly interrupt, "Look what I built." And I would back them up, showing them that respect is not a privilege but a right. The cousins, once divided by entitlement and resentment, began to forge real friendships. Zach and Madison, stripped of endless luxuries, slowly adjusted to simpler lives. Without the shadow of constant comparison, they started to play, laugh, and bond with Lily and Jason in ways I never thought possible. Family therapy became part of our new routine, another boundary I had insisted upon if I were to stay involved. At first, my parents resisted, scoffing at the idea. But over time, guided by Dr. Winters, we began to confront decades of favoritism, silence, and hurt. "Boundaries are not walls," she told us. "They are fences with gates. You decide who to let in, and how much." Those words changed everything for me. Now, as I sit here, I see a family not healed, but healing. Not perfect, but trying. And most of all, I see my children thriving. Lily's artwork fills the walls of our home. Jason's experiments bubble in the garage. They no longer sit quietly on the edges, waiting to be noticed. They stand tall, confident, knowing they deserve respect. I realize now that breaking free wasn't just about leaving that mansion. It was about teaching my children to demand better, to expect love without conditions. And yet, one final chapter was waiting, the moment when my parents, stripped of their pride, would finally speak words I thought I would never hear. 6 months after that night of takeout and humiliation, I hosted a Sunday dinner of my own. Not in a mansion with marble floors and chandeliers, but in my new home, a warm 4-bedroom house with a backyard where laughter carried farther than judgment ever could. My name is Amelia, and this was the night the story came full circle. I set the table simply. No polished silver, no antique china, just white plates, clean glasses, and a vase of flowers Lily had arranged herself. Jason buzzed with excitement, helping me carry dishes to the table. "This feels different, Mom," he whispered, and I smiled. "Because it island." When the doorbell rang, my heart skipped. My parents stood there, looking older somehow, stripped of the armor they once wore. My father no longer carried himself like a king, but like a man tired of battles lost. My mother clutched a casserole dish, something I had never seen her make with her own hands. Diane followed behind, her children at her side. She wore no designer gown, just a simple dress from the boutique where she now worked. As everyone gathered around the table, I braced myself for old patterns. But instead of criticism or competition, there was quiet. Conversation started slowly, awkwardly, like a car sputtering to life. Then Lily shyly brought out her newest painting. I waited for the dismissal, the polite nod, the inevitable comparison. Instead, my mother leaned forward, studying the brushstrokes. "The colors are beautiful, Lily," she said softly. "You've captured the light perfectly." For a moment, I forgot to breathe. Jason, emboldened, launched into a story about a science project, complete with dramatic hand gestures. My father listened, really listened, and asked a question about how the experiment worked. Jason beamed. Later, as I cleared the plates, my father approached me. He shifted uncomfortably, his voice lower than I'd ever heard it. "You have a lovely home, Amelia, and you've done a remarkable job with your children." It wasn't an apology, but it was more than I'd ever been given. I nodded, meeting his eyes. "Thank you, Dad." The evening wasn't perfect. Diane still slipped into entitlement once or twice, and my mother made one careless comparison before catching herself. But the difference was undeniable. The air no longer crackled with judgment. My children no longer shrank into themselves. For the first time, Sunday dinner felt like family, not performance. As I tucked Lily and Jason into bed that night, Lily whispered, "Grandma liked my painting." Jason grinned, and Grandpa asked me about my project. Their voices carried wonder, not disbelief. They were beginning to believe in their own worth, not as shadows, but as children fully seen. And I knew then that this was the real victory. Not wealth, not houses, not trust funds, but teaching my children that respect was not negotiable, that love must be unconditional, that they had the right to walk away from any table where scraps were offered instead of dignity. So here's my final thought for you. If you are sitting at a table where love feels conditional, where respect is rationed like a privilege, maybe it's time to find another table. Or build your own, like I did. And if this story spoke to you, don't leave without joining this community. Hit that subscribe button, share this video, and let's keep these conversations alive. Because the more we share, the less alone we all feel. This wasn't the ending of my story, it was the beginning of a new one. And maybe, just maybe, it can be the beginning of yours too. The night after that final dinner, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, the soft hum of crickets filling the quiet. The house behind me glowed warmly, my children asleep in their rooms, their laughter still lingering in the air. I thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation, the walkout, the revelations, and the slow, fragile healing that followed. For years I had believed strength meant silence, that to keep peace, I had to swallow my pride, to let my parents' favoritism and cruelty pass without challenge. But I learned the opposite was true. Real strength came the moment I stood up, not just for myself, but for Lily and Jason. That night, when I chose to leave, I wasn't just breaking free. I was rewriting our story. My parents are still learning, Diane is still rebuilding, and I am still finding my voice. But the difference now is that boundaries exist. Respect is demanded, not begged for. And love, when it is offered, feels real. My children see it, they feel it. They know their worth because I finally chose to show them mine. Sometimes, walking away from the table is the bravest act of love, not only for yourself, but for the generations who follow. Tonight, as I watch the stars scatter across the sky, I know this truth deep in my bones. We are no longer living on scraps, we are living free. And that, more than anything, is the legacy I want to leave behind.